that if we look more carefully at our experience, we are consciousness before we are a body. So we are not a body endowed with consciousness. We are not a body in which consciousness appears. That's not our experience. And that's nobody's experience. That's just a belief without any experiential foundation. Our actual experience is that we are consciousness to which a body appears.
And when we really wake up, you can't miss that. When awakening to reality really happens, you can't actually miss. My God, there's no such thing as a true belief. Reality itself is simple, clear, and unitary. There's nothing mysterious about it.
According to the Lakota tradition, the universe was born from an eternal spirit named Ea. The Lakota people believe that all of life comes from this spirit and contains this spirit within it. If we stick to the story that all life is made of matter, then this philosophy sounds pretty strange. However, new discoveries in quantum physics are revealing that matter is really a form of energy, and this energy emerges from a source that is beyond space and time, a source that physicist Amit Goswami says is our consciousness. With this in mind, the Lakota philosophy doesn't sound so strange, but actually makes a lot of sense. It is a simple way of describing the truth that there's a domain of reality that exists beyond the world we perceive. Call it Ea, call it spirit, call it consciousness, the quantum field, God, or whatever you'd like. But it is from this domain of reality that everything comes into and out of being.
Divine intention, otherwise no experience. All this that we see, including the ego, all is the self. All of it is the one reality. Even illusions are part of the reality. Everything, if you understood it like this, that is the one self that manifests through consciousness and through forms and expresses itself as innumerable forms and embeds itself in each form in the feeling I am. And then further on from this I am feeling, which is not personal, gets further identified with the instrument through which it can taste experiencing and arises as a me, I am me, George, Susan, whatever it is. Then you can see how this projection took place, and that all of it, as far as it is extended, is all the one pure consciousness.
The other thing about knowing who you are
the daily life we perceive with our five senses is not reality. Quantum physics has shown that space and time are illusions of perception. Therefore, our bodies cannot truly be a reality if they occupy this space.
Ernest Rutherford performed an experiment in Manchester that revealed to him the shape of the interior of an atom. Scientists were shocked to discover that the atom is almost entirely empty space. The question then became, how could this empty atom possibly make the solid world around us?
Our true consciousness does not exist in our brains or in our bodies. But this illusion of our individual bodies, along with the misinformation of our true origins, has manifested the idea that we all think independently from one another. With this misunderstanding, it would seem impossible to scientifically explain telepathy, clairvoyance, spiritual mediums, and other phenomena dealing with transferring information between sources without physical means of communication. But when you understand that there is a common spiritual bond between all things in the universe, and that we are all part of one divine intelligence, no phenomena is unexplainable. This simple understanding fills all the holes in modern religions. It explains reincarnation, deja vu, predictions of the future, and literally every event, occurrence.
But what does that have to do with me if I truly know that I'm a mind? And I'm a mind, that means I'm a dreamer whose existence is outside of the dream. In other words, I'm not the dream figure, I'm not this person, I'm not this body, I'm a mind. So you want to understand again that we are all the same. And that takes a lot of hard work, because all of our conditioning, all of our programming, all of our training has been exactly the opposite. Again, it takes a lot of hard work. It takes dedication, commitment, and a lot of practice to continually try to catch the thoughts of differences, of attack, of specialness, all the same thing, all the same thing.
That we believe that because of the culture we live in, we believe that there is strong evidence that consciousness is separate, that it is personal.
Instead of the ego, and look at the world and the individuals in the world and our special relationships through their eyes. And this is the eyes of what the Course refers to as Christ's vision, that sees that everyone is the same. Yes, your body may be different from mine. Yes, your religion, your skin color, your nationality, your political point of view may be different from mine. Right? Your gender may be different from mine. Your sexual preference may be different from mine. But on the level of the mind, you and I are the same. You have the same ego that I do, you have the same Holy Spirit that I do, and you have the same power to choose between them that I do. Right? That's the fact. That's the only, indeed we can say that's the only fact that we can enumerate or point to in the illusory world. The fact that we're all the same. And this is the counterpart or the reflection of the true truth, if I could say that, of the true truth that we are one.
Separation is not real. Nothing is, there is no separate entity in the cosmos.
That this is a dream that we will awaken from. And it's that awakening that is enlightenment. What happens to a dream when you wake up? It disappears. And what it is replaced by is reality. And reality is God, which is perfect oneness. In fact, the Course describes heaven as the awareness of perfect oneness and the knowledge that there is nothing else outside of this oneness, and nothing else with. And what you really are is exactly the same as your source, exactly the same as God, no difference, which means that it's perfect oneness, which means that you're not just part of it, you're all of it, exactly the same as God. Then the Course says nothing unreal. And the way that it works, and this is a very important principle of the mind that is stated in the Course, it says, as you see him, you will see yourself. And it must be pretty important, because then it says, never forget this. In that person, you'll either find yourself or lose yourself. So the way it works is, if you could get down deep enough into the mind, you would discover that there's just one mind. And the reason that there's just one mind is because there's really just one of us.
Is the meditation, it's all within. Because if you think about it, there isn't anything, in creation, the whole of creation, that is perfect. There is nothing that goes wrong with nature. Only what man does, then it goes wrong. But we are made of that thing. The very essence of our being, of every atom in our body, is made from this perfect knowledge, this perfect consciousness. But superimposed on that is through, if I can use the word, the tidal wave of bull that goes through the world.
It's cable, you can say that.
Yeah, so there's this, we're being barraged by, by bull. But not only that, the way the world is structured, or the way creation is structured, we have duality, which says yes, no, good, bad, loss, gain, birth, death. And it's this circle that you get trapped in. It's like the Memphis Blues again. And that's the hardest thing to to understand. What is causing both of these things? What's causing day and night, good and bad? It's all the cause, and this is the effect. So I mean, we're getting really transcendental here, but
Well,
to
no,
say that our physical being is really on a very, very subtle level. It's just like the sap in a tree is the sap, and it runs throughout all the parts of the tree. Now, it's like that. Our bodies are manifesting into physical bodies, but the cause, the sap, is pure consciousness, pure awareness, and that is perfect and perfect knowledge. But we have to tap into that to understand.
Worship is a contraction, you know, of an old English word, worth shape, to shape your own worth in the image of God. But the true meaning is to realize that your worth is already the shape of God. You are made in the image of God, as the Bible says. But what image are we talking about? It's not the physical organism. It's the inner light. That is the form of God. Infinite light, infinite presence, infinite bliss. It's when we realize that then we will see all as God. And life becomes an act of worship. We live in the eternal present. And we recognize everyone that we meet as a living symbol of the divine. So this is a room full of goddesses and of gods. And when we realize that, and when we realize what that means is not, oh, the ego is a god over others, no, but one has surrendered the ego to the true God consciousness, then we are free to see each other in a state of unconditional love and not to be caught up in any other egoic games, because we're already free. We don't have to live in a state of desire and fear that creates the hell realm that is egoic life.
And then we get this strange feeling that we have never had, you see, in our lives, except occasionally by accident. Some people get a glimpse that we are no longer this poor little stranger and afraid in a world it never made, but that you are this universe, and you are creating it at every moment, because you see, it starts now. It didn't begin in the past. There was no past. See, if the universe began in the past, when that happened, it was now. See? Well, it's still now. And the universe is still beginning now, and it's trailing off like the wake of a ship from now. And the wake of the ship fades out, so does the past. And if you know, you see, that I, in the sense of the person, the front, the ego, it really doesn't exist, then it won't go to your head too badly if you wake up and discover that you're God.
If the soul wishes to contemplate the ineffable one, the good, it must be intellectified and be reunited with the divine nous, which does not belong to any individual, but is rather universal. The mystical experience in Platonism and Neoplatonism is implicitly based on the Eleusinian model, because both the term mystical itself, which for Plotinus designates simply the hidden meaning, and the notion of the experience of God as an epiphany of light and vision derive from the philosophical interpretation of the Eleusinian and Ra-Osirian mysteries. Ascension through the different levels of reality brings about a radical transformation of the being through the realization that the physical body and its constituents are a part of a much greater whole, and that the human mind depends upon a superior divine intellect, which illuminates it and permits it to think. The spiritual ascent is not a theoretical journey undertaken by reason, but it is a movement in consciousness, active imagination, and spirit, which transforms one's being and brings an inner unification and union with the divine. The supreme goal of life is to be united to the good, who is above all things. According to Plotinus, our concern is not to be free of sin, but to be God. The soul must become all things. However, soul is not a fixed entity, but rather a label for a variety of psychic and intellectual activities. It seems that Plotinus distinguished the concept of soul and the egocentric consciousness, or self, which is lower than the undescended summit of the soul, and higher than the subconscious processes. This moving center of consciousness is the subject both of vulgar, ethical behavior and the civic virtues. Soul is regarded as a continuum extending from the summit of the soul, which is constantly united to the divine intellect, through the empirical self, right down to the irrational image that is called Hemias, a fluctuating spotlight of consciousness. The aspiration for self-realization, or self-knowledge, is the aspiration for one's true identity with the archetypal summit through the self's reverting upon itself. The incorporeal self cannot be known discursively. When consciousness returns to the stage of pure intellection and realizes its eternal unity with nous or nous, it is no longer soul. It has become intellect.
And just what is it?
When you see in one moment that you are not body, senses, mind, that means body, senses, mind have no reality in itself, depends on consciousness, depends on your presence. Then there is a natural giving up what you are not. In this giving up, you don't give up anything, but your understanding brings to the giving up. You will find yourself suddenly in a completely new dimension. A dimension which don't emphasize the object, body, senses, mind, but which emphasize the light. That is enlightenment. In other words, more simply, in the moment that you understand there's nobody. You may occasionally be a woman, occasionally be this or that personality from this or this country, but it appears occasionally. But what you are in your totality, in your fullness, in your completeness, you are the self. You are the I am. See that you are not a person, that you are the I am, is a kind of form of enlightenment.
God is not just with us, not just beside us, not just under us, not just over us, but within us, the deepest level, and actually is a step beyond the true self. Self itself is a great subject of discussion. What is the self? The only self we really know is the one that developed in infancy under the influence of the three emotional programs, but especially under the influence of a separate self sense, so that the infant, after 6 or 8 months, depending on mother, begins to realize she's not going to do everything forever. Not rationally yet, but intuitively. So it begins to take care of itself, and so then it needs to feel secure, to feel loved, and these are very grounding experiences, and its need to experiment or power and control. And I've gone into that at great length in some of my books. So the self then is not an entity. Science has looked everywhere for a self in the human organism and can't find one. So there's no central accountable place of a physical nature that you can identify. But if you remember the development of the child, that at each level, when it moves to a new level, and it has to let go of things that it liked in the previous stage, but didn't feel that they were necessary to maintain because of the new perspective. So every substantial change in life or in consciousness provides a whole new perspective that then requires some time to integrate it into our mind, body, emotions, and spirit. And so God must know this. This being beyond being, whoever he, she, or it is, there is no word or concept to embrace it all. It's not overwhelming, but it's monumental. And it insinuates everything so that this presence, perhaps is my favorite word for it, is in everything without being limited to anything. It just is. And this is the mystery that has created us with such great love, so that each of us is primarily God, or at least participating in God before we're anything else. God is more us than we are, because we were in his mind forever, and we will be with him in due time forever too.
The self, which alone truly exists, and which is absolutely one, is yourself. There is no other kind of yourself. The self is absolute being, without beginning, without end, free of form, embodiment and individuality. And there is no other kind of being. This is your being. The self is consciousness, self-luminous, infinite, homogeneous. This is your own consciousness. And there isn't a second or third type of consciousness. The self is of the very nature of bliss. And there exists no happiness apart from that. The appearance of a self other than the self, a reality other than the one reality, Brahman, is merely an illusion. The power of illusion is just one's own knowing or believing in it. So that illusion is not inherent in Brahman or the self, but is merely delusion.
Consciousness alone is the substratum of everything that exists in the universe. Whatever you see, mountain, river, forest, birds, men, and anything that you see, you are conscious of it. You see the sun, moon, time, day and night. Sun for the day, moon for the night. And this time is from the consciousness, because you are conscious this is day and this is night. This is moon and this is the sun. And anything, the mountains and the rivers, they are in space. So this space and time derive their existence from the consciousness alone. Therefore, they ought to be in consciousness. There is nothing that is outside of consciousness. And this consciousness is omnipresent. It exists in all the atoms of the universe. There is nothing where there is no consciousness.
We are awareness. You are an awareness and I am an awareness, and our awareness not separate. Not separate. And awareness is one name for God. And we are fingers of consciousness for the one consciousness. Fingers, and we first identify as separate fingers. Then we identify with the hand. Then we identify with the body. Then all bodies. When we identify with all bodies, then we are identified with our awareness. You can see, hear, taste, etc., doing something. But awareness, you can only be. You can't look for awareness. You can only be awareness.
I'm reminded of a slogan or two I saw some students carrying once. One said, all wars are civil wars because all men are brothers. Right. And another one said, there is no they.
Right, exactly. And that's one of the components of the LSD experience. The understanding that there is no they. There's no other. It is all one. And it's really, what happens here is, there are a lot of experiments in psychology with figure ground. That is the relation of the background to what stands out, right? Now, in our culture, we've been trained for individual differences to stand out. So you look at each person, the immediate hit is brighter, dumber, older, younger, richer, poorer, and we make all these dimensional distinctions, put them in categories, and treat them that way. And we get so that we only see others as separate from ourselves in the ways in which they're separate. And one of the dramatic characteristics of the psychedelic experience is being with another person and suddenly seeing the ways in which they are like you, not different from you, and experiencing the fact, well, yes, indeed, we are brothers in the true sense of that which is essence in you and which is essence in me is indeed one.
No, see that the one you believe to be and that you suggest you should accept despite you not liking it, is not the one you really are. The one you really are is this extraordinary awareness which is hearing these words right now. Nothing else. Stop linking this awareness to this body-mind called look. Be open to the possibility that this awareness is independent from the body-mind that you call look, and that this awareness is the real look, and that this awareness is already free, and that this awareness, the moment it stops believing to be hostage of the body-mind called look, and to be dependent on it, we recover both its freedom, its power, and its peace and happiness.
What I really want to say to you is this. Having seen clearly that there is no I living life through or as this body, what has been seen is that, of course, something is here. Something is aware. Something sees. Something hears. And paradoxically, there is nothing that sees, nothing that hears, nothing that speaks. There's only seeing, hearing, speaking. Sounds crazy to those of you who perhaps have never heard that before. However, that's what it is. Think of the body as a receiving and transmitting unit, literally. The body is, in the words of Suzanne Segal, who knows as well as anyone that this is a circuitry, like an electrical circuitry. And the circuitry receives information in from all of the senses that are built into the body. The sight sensing, the hearing sensing, sensations, feelings, thought sensing. And that input is transmuted and transmitted through the body back to what is aware, back to what is conscious.
These words, chapter 12, the very end of it, it's called The Veil Removed. This is the ineffable secret, the ultimate illumination, the key to peace and power. You are God. Those are the three magic words. If you will accept this towering truth and dare to stand atop this magnificent pinnacle, universal consciousness will be revealed to you from within. God is there. It is He who peers from behind your eyes, who is your own consciousness, who is your very self. You are not just a part of God, you are altogether God. And God is altogether you. Now, that's scary stuff for a lot of people. We weren't raised to believe that. I'm not saying that you ought to go out into the world and say, excuse me, but you know who you're talking to, that I am God. And the reason that we laugh is because we think of God as the God that we've created in our own image, the God of the ego, the God who's angry, the God who wants special favors, the God who has the ability to heal but withholds it. But there's another word that Jesus used in the New Testament, and this is the God I speak of, quoting Him. God is love. And he that dwelleth in love dwelleth in me, and I in him. God is love. Pure, unconditional, blissful, divine love. That's who you are. The second great teaching was a man named Neville Goddard. Passed away in 1972. Lectured over in California, particularly in the 40s and 50s and 60s. I read his book, The Power of Awareness, 7 times. I gave it to each one of my children at Christmas a couple of years ago, and they called me up and they said, "Dad, it's great, but I don't understand it. It's a little heavy." I said, "Well, then maybe it's part of my Dharma to make it a little clearer." And chapter 27, the last chapter of his book, The Power of Awareness, it says this: in all of creation, in all of eternity, in all the realms of your infinite being, the most wonderful fact is that which is stressed in the first chapter of this book. You are God. You are the I am that I am. You are consciousness. You are the creator. This is the mystery. This is the great secret known by the seers and prophets and mystics throughout the ages. This is the truth that you can never know intellectually. If you want to understand something intellectually, what you must do is analyze it, come up with a formula for it, study it, look at other experts about it, and come up to a conclusion. If you want to understand something spiritually, you must first experience it. You must come to know this within. In the New Testament, which I read completely before I wrote Wishes Fulfilled, Jesus is about to be stoned. And he says, "Why would you stone me?" And they say, "Because you blaspheme. You are a man, and you claim to be God." And Jesus responds in his words, "Is it not written in your laws that I have said you are gods?" All of you. We are all gods. We have within us, not the God that so often we are taught is outside of us, but the God that is love, the God that is perfect love, the soul that wants to expand because it is infinite and doesn't want to be restricted.
Maybe you are not serious, but
And that's what every true spiritual path wants to do. It wants to help you discover who you are, not who some sacred book tells you you're supposed to be. And there's really only one concept. Now, it has many names, and some names are mythological, some are phenomenological, some are doctrinal, some are come out of metaphysical discourses, but it's all the same. The simplest is the self. But the self is often confused with the ego, so sometimes we say the original self, the true self, the supreme self, or emptiness. Empty of ego, empty of ideas, empty of falseness and images, cleared out. But you could also use names for God, because all of those names come down to meaning I am. Isn't that what Yahweh means? I am that I am. So we're talking about the I. Not the thought I, because that's a representation already. That's a step removed. But the actual I. Have you ever really encountered yourself? Or is there an addiction to language that pulls you away from the self, pulls you again into thoughts, desires, fears, lack? Do you have the courage to stay in the presence that is the self and not run away? And not think that you have to use your mind to grasp what you are. Because all the mind can do is grasp what you are not. It has no capacity to grasp what you are. Because you are ungraspable. Because what you are is not a concept. And so even if we put all the possible terms for the self end to end, and listed them all and memorized them all, you would still not know who you are. The list would always be inadequate, and it would always be a lot of blah blah language, and it would not tell you who is the perceiver of all those words. What is consciousness itself?
And so in the tradition of neti, which means not this, not that, we always start out, realize you're not the body. You can't be the body. You're aware of the body, and so the body is an object to the perceiver. You can't be the mind, because the mind, again, is mental objects, words and images. You can't be emotions, feelings, not even love, because again, that's something that arises. You are deeper than any of that. Deeper. Because you are the perceiver of it. What is the perceiver? What is the ultimate presence that cannot be witnessed? Because you are that, and therefore you cannot know it as some other object. That which is completely non-objectifiable, that is what you are.
Until about the age of 29 or so, he came to the point where he couldn't live with himself anymore. So he said, I can't live with myself anymore. And at that point, he realized that there aren't two, I and myself, where our problems come. You see, the reason why we do not realize is because we think there are two of us. All the time this is happening, even in spirituality. In spirituality, people say, oh, there's a lower self and a higher self. You know, and everybody believes that. You see, and as long as you think there are two, you will never understand. So, and then he realized that there aren't two of him. And he saw the question is, he began thinking about it, feeling it, in other words, you know, there are two, there aren't any two. Because if there are two of me, then there must be something more real. And I'm suicidal here, so there must be some part of me. And anyway, this led him to a great fear of the void, the emptiness, because he began to see that there might not be a me as I thought there was. And then the next day he got up, the birds were singing and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, most of you probably know the story, but it's apropos to what we're discussing today. There aren't two of you. Everybody thinks there are two of them. How many people say, I'm learning to like myself. I, myself. Or I don't like myself. Or I don't like my life, whatever. So I, my, and life, owning it. And so we learn through this process of two-ness all the time. But we're here at satsang. We only want what is absolute, what is real. What is real is oneness, known as love. Of course, you know, when we talk about love, the teacher says, feel it. What does feeling mean, incidentally? And I'd like to go into it because people keep saying, I don't feel it. And this is universal. Every client says that to me. What does it mean, you don't feel it? When a teacher says, feel it, what they're trying to say is, go to the concept that you have about it. Immediately become aware of what you think it is, and then go deeper. That's what means feel it, okay? Because whatever you think it is not. Take it for granted, it is not. All my life, I thought love was, oh, I think I got it. And right away there's a slap in the face. No, it's deeper than that. And then I think I got it again, this oneness. Then no, it's not. It's deeper than that. So we're talking about oneness. You see, oneness is such a totality, is such a grand thing. You are all space, all being, and yet you still retain that semblance of, I am this person. That can be helped, you see? Because it's working from that point, from that field of experience. So there aren't two.
So in order to bring manifestation into existence, consciousness has to know something finite. But infinite consciousness cannot know something finite. Therefore, to bring manifestation into existence, consciousness has to overlook the knowing of its own infinite being. It has to forget itself. That is what Rumi meant when he said knowledge of the world is a kind of ignorance. That's what Wordsworth meant when he said our birth, or the birth of the waking state, is but a sleep and a forgetting. In other words, infinite consciousness appears in the form of finite subjects and objects in order to bring the manifestation which is inside itself in potential out of itself into existence. And that's what existence means, ex and sistere, to stand out from. So in order to make a world stand out from itself, or seem to stand out from itself, because in fact no thing ever actually comes into existence, but in order to seem to bring manifestation into apparent existence, consciousness must fall asleep to the knowing of its own being. It must veil itself from itself.
What is self? Now I notice that it's spelled with a capital S. I don't know whether it's a mistake or on purpose. Probably on purpose. There's one self, that's the illusion, that is the identification with the mind and the ego, which is the unobserved mind. And there's a self that arises there, that is a dreadful burden to live with. You carry around, most people for their whole life, they carry the burden of a mentally defined sense of who they are, me. What about me? That's the little self, the illusory self. And that's the self that most people refer to when they say I. But I potentially has a deeper meaning and is the deepest word, perhaps we could say, in the language. In its truest sense, I refers to who you are beyond the form, beyond the thoughts and the emotions. You as the consciousness is the self. Now the self has no form, you cannot grasp it, you cannot see it, you cannot really define it. You can never say, ah, there it is. Because who is saying that? You are the consciousness, the perceiving, you are it. You can never see it as an object external to yourself. It's the essence. You are not what is seen, you are the seeing, you are the consciousness behind the seeing. You are not what you hear, you are the consciousness behind what you hear. So it's never, this is what Jesus said when he used the term the kingdom of heaven or the kingdom of God. He said in one of the Gospels, the kingdom of heaven does not come with signs to be observed. You cannot say, ah, here it is, or ah, it's over there. It's a free translation, more or less, that's what he said. And of course, what do Christians do? They're waiting for the kingdom of heaven to arrive. When they've been told, you won't be able to see it. You can't say, ah, there it is. It does not come with signs to be observed. Literally, he said that. And I'm sure that's one of the, there's a lot of things that people later put into his mouth, but that is one of the things, words that were uttered by somebody who knew the reality. It doesn't come with signs to be observed. You can never see it or grasp it or know it as an object for your knowledge. Because you essentially are it as the consciousness that perceives, the consciousness behind your thinking, behind your emotions, behind your perceptions, behind your experiences, the very light of the world. Another thing he said. He not only said, Jesus, I am the light of the world, he said also, you are the light of the world. So he's pointing, what is the light? Is the light of consciousness which illuminates the world. You are that. That is the self. It has no form.
You are the eternal being. The unnameable, the unborn awareness. Time is nothing for you. It's your play. But until you are fully awake to this, what temple will you build in the name of this seeing? This is your temple. Find who really dwells here in your own self.
You were never born. No name and no form sticks to you. They are only your temporary garment. You are the light of awareness itself, the light of consciousness. But you're also beyond this, as the weakness of this light and all that appears in this light. You are immaculate being.